It's Friday, October 24th here in Korea, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. The stories we're following at this hour. Korea and the U.S. agreed to delay the transfer of wartime operational control from Washington to Seoul. No date has been set, but the handover is expected to happen sometime in the mid-2020s. A doctor in New York tests positive for the deadly Ebola virus. City officials say the public's chance of contracting the disease is slim. And Korea's third quarter GDP grows 3.2% on year, the slowest pace in more than a year. The central bank points to poor performances by conglomerates as one of the main reasons. Now, Seoul and Washington have finally come to a conclusion on when to transfer wartime operational control should take place. Now, currently, the U.S. has control of the troops on South Korea's soil, and it looks like it will stay that way until the mid-2020s. Our Kim Min-ji has our top story.
South Korea and the United States have agreed to postpone once again the transfer of wartime operational control of Korean troops from Washington to Seoul. The two allies did not set a new timeline, but the transfer is expected to take place sometime in the mid-2020s. The decision came at the annual security consultative meeting in Washington between South Korea's Defense Minister Han Min-gu and his U.S. counterpart Chuck Hagel. The handover was initially scheduled for 2012 before being delayed to 2015. Seoul has peacetime control of its 639,000 service members, but if a war breaks out on the Korean peninsula, the U.S. commander of the American troops here takes the control of the Korean soldiers. According to a joint statement released after the meeting, the deal was made in light of the evolving security environment in the region, which includes North Korea's nuclear and missile threats and the need to maintain a strong combined defense posture. Seoul and Washington agreed to a conditions-based approach. The eventual transfer will only come once the security environment in the region allows for a stable transition, when the South Korean military is equipped with core capabilities and is ready to counter threats from the north. Based upon the recommendations of the defense chiefs, the presidents of South Korea and the U.S. will determine the appropriate timing for the transition. In a joint press conference, Hagel reaffirmed the U.S. commitment to its ally.
I emphasize that the United States remains committed to using all our military capabilities both on and off the Korean Peninsula, including conventional strike, missile defense, and our nuclear umbrella, to ensure that our extended deterrence is credible and effective.
The agreement underlines the strong alliance and determination of the two nations to cope with threats posed by North Korea. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
And no official discussions between Seoul and Washington took place on deploying a U.S.-led missile defense system on the peninsula. That's also according to the U.S. Defense Chief Chuck Hagel. He also said he doesn't plan on making any policy changes regarding the American troops in South Korea at this point. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel says the U.S. has no plans to reduce the number of American troops stationed in South Korea. Speaking at a joint news conference alongside Korean Defense Chief Han Min-gu at the Pentagon on Thursday, Hagel said the United States does not intend to change its deployment policy for Korea. In fact, it's just the opposite. Hagel said Washington wants to adjust and upgrade deployments on a rotational basis. The defense chief's remarks follow others made by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry on Wednesday, when he said the U.S. was prepared to begin reducing the number of American forces in the region if North Korea shows a commitment to denuclearizing. Hagel also spoke for the first time publicly about the possible deployment of a U.S. missile defense system in the South. He said there have been no formal discussions on the matter on any level between Seoul and Washington, although he did add that all options are being explored. The issue came to the fore when Deputy Defense Secretary Robert Work said earlier this month that the U.S. was considering sending the defense system to South Korea, and that talks were being had with Seoul on the matter. Korea is focused on developing its own missile defense system called the Korea Air and Missile Defense, which it says is more suitable to countering missile threats on the peninsula. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
And North Korea has warned of more military strikes if activists in the south continue to fly anti-Pyongyang leaflets across the inter-Korean border. Now that has observers and citizens living near the border worried, as the group has plans to send 50,000 flyers into the air tomorrow. Our Hwang Sung-hee has more.
The voices of those opposed to the flying of air balloons carrying anti-Pyongyang leaflets across the inter-Korean border are growing louder. For those living in the border region, it's an issue of safety. North Korea warned of another military strike if South Korean air balloons are seen crossing its border, just as it did 2 weeks ago.
Our residents and activists from civic groups will block any further attempts.
A group of activists say they will send as many as 50,000 leaflets this Saturday to disseminate much-needed information in the reclusive state.
When North Koreans are aware of the truth, their fury against the North Korean leadership will soar.
North Korea has repeatedly called on the South to stop the spread of the leaflets, saying it will jeopardize upcoming high-level talks. The two have agreed to meet sometime between late October and early November.
If the South Korean government takes responsible steps to prevent provocative actions that call for military clashes, there's no reason to cancel the planned second round of high-level talks.
Analysts say North Korea is trying to get an upper hand at the upcoming talks by setting the leaflet issue as one of the agenda items. Some question the effectiveness of the leaflets and say it's merely a publicity stunt for the activists.
Want to have some events, and it's really about them to demonstrate their anti-communism or their opposition to North Korea. But as far as actually getting information into North Korea, changing anything on the ground, I think the effect is practically zero.
The South Korean government says they have no legal grounds to ban activists from sending the leaflets. But the National Police Agency said Friday that police will step in if the situation appears to threaten the public's safety. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
In other news, the ferry that has been trapped underwater for 6 months after a tragic sinking that killed more than 300 people may soon be brought up to the surface. The 9 families of the missing have told their lawyer that they will review whether the hull of the SEWOL-HO ferry can be brought to the surface as part of the final step in the search process. The families reportedly say they are willing to talk with the government and that they are discussing whether to put the fate of the search process up for a vote and allow a 2/3 majority take the lead. In the year 2012, for Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul.
Shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through. The Canadian police have released a surveillance video of the now deceased gunman at the country's parliament Wednesday, and it shows how he gained access to the facility. The investigation continues, with Canada moving to bolster laws to counter terrorism. Connie Kim has this report.
The surveillance video of the shooting in Canada Wednesday morning shows how the gunman got into Parliament. The video shows 32-year-old Michael Zihaf-Bibo pulling up in a car, getting out with a firearm, and running toward the Parliament. Police say they recognize that something was wrong and that security officers engaged in an exchange of gunfire. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police said in a press conference Thursday that Zihaf-Bibo had acted alone and was not one of the 90 people identified as high-risk travelers.
Our partners at the Ottawa Police Service and the RCMP agreed that yesterday Zihaf-Bibo acted alone and that he is the same person that perpetrated the attacks at both the National War Memorial and on Parliament Hill.
While authorities are still investigating the motive behind the shooting, authorities suspect Zihaf-Bibo was self-radicalized. He's reported to harbor extremist beliefs and had previously expressed the desire to go to Syria to join the jihadist fight there. Wednesday's shooting left 24-year-old Corporal Nathan Cirillo dead with 3 people injured. And with the nation in a state of fear, the Canadian Prime Minister said the country would stand firm.
We will be vigilant, but we will not run scared. We will be prudent, but we will not panic.
Prime Minister Harper also made public his plans to enact new anti-terror powers and strengthen the country's terror laws. This includes giving more power to the intelligence service to track and detain suspected terrorists. The Canadian Prime Minister has also pledged to speed up plans that will toughen powers of surveillance, detention, and arrest. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Preliminary blood tests have shown that a New York City doctor has contracted Ebola. 33-year-old Dr. Craig Spencer, who recently returned from Guinea, placed himself in isolation on Thursday after developing fever and gastrointestinal symptoms. A follow-up blood test will be conducted by the CDC. Now, city government and health officials held a press conference a few hours ago and assured the public that the chances of an average New Yorker contracting Ebola from Dr. Spencer are slim. In the country of Mali, though, the first Ebola case there has been confirmed in a 2-year-old girl. She had also traveled from neighboring Guinea. Now this, as the WHO's Emergency Committee on Ebola reinforced that winning against the Ebola outbreak means stopping the transmission in West Africa. And on the economic front, back here in Korea, the third quarter GDP growth is out, and although the economy grew nearly 1% on quarter, the pace of growth has fallen short of expectations. Officials attribute this to sluggish exports and facilities investment. Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
It was not all good news, although the Korean economy accelerated in the July to September period. The Bank of Korea said Friday that the domestic economy grew 0.9% in the third quarter this year from a quarter earlier, speeding up from a 0.5% growth in the April to June period. That, however, was largely due to a low base in the second quarter when domestic consumption dropped sharply after April's ferry disaster. It was also the increased government spending that led the rise.
The execution of public finances that were delayed because of the local elections and Seoul ferry disaster took place in the third quarter, contributing to third quarter growth.
From a year earlier, the Korean economy expanded 3.2%, the slowest pace in more than a year. And Korea's traditional growth engine, exports, slipped 2.6% in the third quarter from the previous quarter, while the output in the country's manufacturing sector dropped 0.9%. That marks the first drop in 5.5 years. The central bank cited the sluggish global economy and the recent poor performance by some of Korea's major conglomerates like Samsung Electronics as major reasons. Facility investment also dropped 0.8%, marking a slowdown from a surprise rise in the second quarter this year of 1.1%. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
And there may be a reason why facilities investment was seeing a drop. Samsung Electronics, Hyundai Motor, and LG Group seems to be investing more in R&D for now, building additional centers in Seoul. Our Kim Ji-yeon has the next story.
Some of Korea's largest conglomerates are building research and development outposts in the capital city of Seoul, a move seen as an attempt to attract more high-quality human resources. Tech giant Samsung Electronics is building a state-of-the-art R&D center on 33,000 square meters of land in the Umyeondong area of Seochogu in southern Seoul. Around 10,000 researchers are expected to move into the new center, which is reportedly envisioned as a more eco-friendly and somewhat more creative facility than the conventional office building. The move follows the company's completion of new research complexes in Gyeonggi-do Province, one in the city of Suwon last November and another in Hwasong in March for the study of electron material. The company spent nearly $14 billion on R&D last year and recruited more than 69,300 researchers. Automotive giant Hyundai Motor is reportedly considering turning its campus in Yangjae-dong into a research complex after having acquired a plot of land in the Samsung-dong district earlier this year. And on Thursday, electronics giant LG Group held a groundbreaking ceremony in Magok Industrial Park for its LG Science Park. Upon completion, the facility is to be the largest technology convergence research center in Korea. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
With just a week left before Apple's new iPhones hit stores in Korea, the nation's three mobile carriers, SK Telecom, KT, and LG U+, have rolled out a series of promotional campaigns to get a jump on what's expected to be some tough competition. SK Telecom is highlighting customized services for iPhone users, while LG is offering discounts on the devices. KT, in the meantime, is touting its high number of base stations nationwide. Now, the three mobile carriers will begin receiving pre-orders for the latest Apple devices this Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. That's less than an hour away, prior to the official release of the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus on October 31st. Not too long ago, fans of the Avengers in Seoul were excited to see a few shots filmed right here in the capital, but apparently there are more superhero movies on the horizon. Our film critic Pierce Conran joins us for more. So Pierce, let's start with the recent leak of the trailer of the new Avengers. What was that all about?
Well, indeed, it was leaked yesterday, and once that happened, word got out very quickly online. Fans went crazy. They were very excited about the footage. This is, of course, probably the biggest film that's coming out next year.
Right.
Now, Marvel, they were quite good about the leak. It went around so quickly and was so positively received that they just kind of were fairly playful about it. They joked on Twitter that it must have been Hydra's fault, which is the group of villains in the whole Marvel universe. And then they released a full HD version. And so that's probably a pretty smart move on their part, because everyone is so excited about the footage. There's no point in having a negative PR about it.
Right. So how do you think it's going to do in Korea? I mean, we have lots of fans here in Korea.
Absolutely. The Marvel brand is very well recognized in Korea. A few years ago, when the first Avengers came out, it was the biggest film of that year with something like 7.6 million admissions. And then last year, Iron Man 3 was even bigger at 9.1 million. So that was, again, the biggest foreign film that screened last year. Based on that alone, I would say that the next Avengers would crack the big 10 million barrier.
The big 10 million barrier.
The big 10 million barrier, absolutely. But this film was, as you already said, was shot in Seoul, and of course that was a huge deal when that happened earlier in spring this year. So with that, and with the popularity of the franchise, I expect some really enormous numbers. And who knows, it could be next year's biggest film.
Well, you say 10 million admissions now. Are any other incoming superhero films expected to have that kind of a similar impact compared to Avengers, the new Avengers movie?
Well, I wouldn't say immediately. Marvel is releasing another film next year. Essentially, Marvel have this whole universe that they've created, starting with the first Iron Man in 2008, and then with subsequent spin-off films like Thor and Captain America and Hulk. And all these characters came together for the Avengers films. So there's another one starting next year called Ant-Man. It's another new character that's not well known in Korea.
Ant-Man.
Ant-Man, yeah. And we had this year already, there was Guardians of the Galaxy, which was a huge hit in America particularly.
Not quite so here.
Yeah, it didn't really catch on here. And the reason for that, I would say, is twofold. One is that the characters in that, they're brand new characters that are not known to the Korean audience. So though it's Marvel, it's not recognizable as Marvel. And also, it really plays into Americana. So I think there's a lot of Star Wars references and a lot of classic 70s music and stuff that was very popular in America. So it caught on really well in America. It was the biggest film in America this year. But those factors didn't really translate here, though people did enjoy it when they saw it, but word didn't really get out.
Right. And I'm going to be honest here, if you're not an avid fan, it's really hard to follow all the characters from Marvel, from DC Comics, and speaking of which, they are making a big play soon, right? Is that when they will enter the fray?
Absolutely. So Marvel have been doing this for a few years, and so they're in they have these phases. They're about to start phase 3, I think. And DC are kind of jumping into it very quickly, as they have a lot of catching up to do. I mean, DC, those have the characters like Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman.
Right.
And we have things like the Dark Knight films earlier, which were also DC, but this is separate. They've started their own DC universe, which started with Man of Steel last year. So that was a Superman reboot. And the next one of those will be Batman versus Superman. So they're introducing Batman with Ben Affleck playing him this time. And that's coming out in 2 years. And so this is to rival the Marvel universe. So again, these characters like Iron Man, Captain America, they're all in this Marvel universe. So DC are starting really in 2016. They're going to have 2 films every year, scheduled right until 2020, which is very ambitious.
Wow, from 2016 to 2020, 2 films per year. Now
least.
that's quite a lot. Isn't that going to create a bit of too much of a competition and kind of become a lose-lose situation for Marvel and DC Comics?
Well, the time will tell. And so in early 2016, we will have these first films. The first one out of the gate will be the previously mentioned Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, I think it's called, which will be out in March, which is very early. Actually, they originally scheduled it for the prime, the first May weekend, which is like the big one, the opening of summer. And Captain America 3 also jumped on that date. And so there was kind of a battle, who's gonna jump off it. And eventually DC ceded the date because I think they figured that the Marvel universe is so big. And Captain America 3 will also feature Iron Man, and coming off of Avengers 2, it's probably gonna be very, very big. And so DC are hoping for a big start with this one film. And then beyond that, there's just so much. They're each having a new film in 2016 as well, new characters. I think it's Suicide Squad is the DC one, which is like a bunch of supervillains that kind of are kind of a little over it or something like that. And then Doctor Strange is another standalone character that's going to be introduced by Marvel. So just a huge amount of films being introduced.
And there are also other studios, you said, that are jumping into this market as well.
Yes. So we have those
as if that's not enough.
As if it's
I'm
not
already
enough.
just swamped with all these
it's
characters.
Incredible, but just wait for it because it gets worse. You have so Disney has all the Marvel films, Warner Brothers has all the DC films, but Marvel also has characters that they don't own the rights to anymore. Principally, there's the X-Men films, which are all owned by Fox. So X-Men characters cannot appear in the Disney films. And so we've had a bunch of X-Men movies. There's more coming. And then there's Sony have the rights to Spider-Man and a few other things.
Right, that I've heard of.
Right.
All the conflict.
That's what started it, actually. Spider-Man was the first film back in 2001. But so 2017 is the craziest one. There's at least 10 films from those 4 studios, which is absolutely insane. And I couldn't even name them all. I'll never remember all those films.
That's why I'm saying, isn't that going to be a lose-lose situation? I mean, the viewers, the moviegoers are going to have too many options and too many choices to make. And where do we draw that fine line?
Well, I've been saying for a while, I think, there's too many comic book movies, it's going to crumble, but it's just getting bigger and bigger, so I don't really know when it stops. But what I do worry about is this thing we can call it kind of economies of scale, maybe, where things are just so enormous now in these films, the stakes are so high. I mean, you can do anything in these films, and they're already at that point. How much bigger can you get? So after a few more years, and once all these characters get to their kind of final thing, I don't know how they can top that again. And because these studios are doing their rival universes, they have to top each other as well. So after a while, it's going to be too big, and I don't know what they'll be able to do anymore.
All right. So if you're a huge fan of comic book characters, then 2016 and 2017 will be the years that you want to look forward to.
Absolutely. But either way, it'll be fun to see how it all plays out.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Pierce, for coming in today.
My pleasure.
Happy Friday, everyone. I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. Now, we have some perfect fall-like weather here today with mostly clear skies, except in Seoul, where it's about a bit cloudy and foggy at the same time, and this will clear as the temperature rises. However, strong winds are expected in Gangwon province today. Now, once the fog clears up, we can expect to see some stronger sunshine with the temperature slightly higher than yesterday and ranging in the low 20s. Now, the weekend forecast looks favorable as well. In fact, we can expect warmer highs. However, from Sunday to Monday, we are expecting some precipitation here in the central region. Now to our readings for today. Seoul will peak at 21 this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will reach both at 22 degrees. Now moving over to other regions, Jeju Island gets up to 21, while Dokdo hits 21 as well, while Gangneung is a bit lower at 13 degrees. Well, that's all for now. I'm Shaw Park, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
That's a wrap from us at this hour. Thank you for watching. More news coming up at 4 p.m. Korea time.